back.
Just like that, we're back. Yeah, and we're now venturing off into our second segment for the day. It's a fun Friday.
It is a fun
Somebody's
Friday.
going to dance up the set right now.
Annie Abidjan?
Social workers training, I think that is a plus for us, for the country in a whole. We've got the folks in to tell us all about this training because it is very important that they do. Now, we've got Melanie Barnes. The Melanie, right? Melanie? Oh, we get it correct this time. Oh my God. Right. Child Protection Officer, and also with UNICEF. Yes. It says here. Starla Bradley, Director. Yeah. Anything up for Director?
Community Rehabilitation Department under the Human Services. Did I get that one?
The Ministry.
You know what?
It's fine.
We may fail at something today.
That's why I left it for you. That's why I left it for you because the gap of man. I'm Ganesha Smith. Yes. We have Ganesha Smith, Human Development Coordinator, Department of Human Services. Ladies, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, you guys got on that phone this morning last night and said 1, 2, 3, good morning. We're gonna say it in sync. But it's nice to have you guys in. I'll tell you, one of the things that you guys do is you guys protect and take care of the wholesome Belize on a whole. And I'm saying this because of child protection, human services. That is human rights. That is taking care of our country. Yeah. That is what you're doing. But there's this workshop, though, that you guys put together to try and get everybody on par. Exactly. Enhancement, sharpen the skills and stuff like that. But let's get to the nitty-gritty of things first, where in terms of like human development and whatnot, tell us about the work of that, and then we move on into the workshop.
So the Ministry of Human Development is the social work ministry. We hire the most social workers in the country to deliver a range of social services. Now, social work is an actual profession. It's a practice-based profession, and it has its own set of academic principles, values, ethics, ways of practicing. And we do work with the most vulnerable in society. Our focus is on enhancing well-being and helping families to meet not just basic needs, but sometimes more complex needs. And a lot of times our clients come to us because they're in some sort of distress or crisis, and that's where we usually intervene. So we do work with vulnerable populations: domestic violence, child abuse and neglect, trafficking in persons, older persons, children in conflict with the law. And the focus is always on human rights. We are advocates, and we empower. So in a nutshell, that's the core of what we do, but we do it through direct practice, which means that our social workers have a lot on their plate. In some areas, our social workers have upwards of 60 cases. And we do practice countrywide in all of these fields of practice. So there's always a lot going on. And just the nature of the work and the issues that people bring, we have to take on and support them, try to empower them. And I always tell people we work with our clients so that eventually they don't need us anymore.
What is the work of a social worker?
You want to take that one?
Interesting that you asked that, and that is exactly what we did throughout our training. It is to guide, it is to empower, it is to advocate for families and children who are vulnerable in every area that you could possibly think about.
All right. I wanted to go a step further and I know that I want to get into the training, but one of the key components that I believe that I think makes us social workers so strong is the fact that they have to go into the home of certain spaces that will prompt some sort of emotion, right? Something that we're not used to, an abusive home, a state where the mother can no longer care for her children because of the amount of poverty that they're in. So how do you guide your social workers for that shock that they're about to enter into?
So it's on multiple levels.
Yes.
First and foremost, the persons that are hired within the ministry come in with a social work degree.
Yes.
We do hire some persons from different social science backgrounds, but they at least come with that theoretical foundation. But social work is a very practice-oriented profession. In order to get their degrees, you have to actually do hundreds of hours of internship. With different populations under the supervision of another qualified social worker who helps to guide and support and integrate theory into practice. But one of the weaknesses that we found within the ministry is that we don't have an in-service training that is across the board, like an induction training. To train generalist practitioners, taking into account the fact that many of these, some of the persons that we do hire aren't social workers. They come with maybe psychology or sociology degrees. So we partnered with UNICEF, and this started all the way back in 2019, if you can imagine, to engage consultants to help us to develop certain modules. So we make the assumption that because persons come with a degree, they should know. But we found in practice that because social work is a very challenging profession to work with, that's not always the case, and we cannot assume when people are faced with the real life situations, sometimes they forget what they might have learned.
Indeed. Indeed.
Right.
Especially with the trauma and what you see firsthand.
Right. Yes. So we approached UNICEF, and we actually launched in 2020, just pre-COVID. But we've been working since then with the consultants to develop the training modules for that we will roll out. So the training modules, that's one of the key components, and we also developed a new supervision framework. You're talking about giving officers that support. How do they cope? How do they deal with the everyday issues?
Yes, of course.
Supervision, social work supervision is so important. And traditionally, we have looked at supervision more as a management. Are you doing this? Are you doing that? How many cases have you seen? And we've forgotten the developmental and supportive components. So we now have a new supervision framework along with the modules. And so this training, what we're calling the social workforce strengthening training of trainers, brought together the middle managers like Mrs. Smith from across all the departments in the ministry, as they are the supervisors to the frontline social workers. And they went back to basics, right? Because the idea of supervision is that you are coaching along the way, you're teaching along the way, you're bringing back the theories into practice along the way. So after social workers go through that initial induction training, then for the entire period that they're working with the ministry, they get supervision. And the practice and theories are integrated throughout. So that's the new approach that we've been taking.
I want to get Melanie,
Melanie,
I apologize, into the conversation to discuss the collaborative role that UNICEF plays in this particular training. I understand that you all were working since 2019, but let's talk about UNICEF's mandate first and foremost, and how you're able to support the ministry with your efforts.
Okay, so UNICEF's mandate, of course, is to support governments in strengthening their system. So we work across all of the ministries, education, health, but particularly with social services, the focus has been on strengthening the child protection system. And so, as Starla mentioned, when they approached us, we saw great value in that approach to focus on strengthening that particular group of service providers to be able to address the growing needs of children. As we mentioned, COVID came, and so we even saw more value because there was an increase in the number of children that were in need, and Then we had the Spotlight Initiative, which is also funded by the European Union, that came on board and with a focus on looking at family violence. And so we tried to integrate all of that, and we're able to expand the work of with the ministry to include the women's department. So not just looking at children, but also looking at women and the whole family as well. And so at the training, we had their social workers that are providing services to women who are in domestic violence situations, as well as the family. So that's how UNICEF works. We try to leverage the spaces and the resources to make as great an impact as possible.
So then let's get into the training aspect of it. The objective of the training is to sharpen the skills of the social worker. It was for about 2 weeks or more.
2 weeks.
And yeah, so it was about 2 weeks.
Today is the last
and I
day.
understand that you had a partnership with UNICEF, and it was not just for supervisors or for just social workers, but it was for everybody. So let's get into what the training was about and how you think the ministry benefits from this.
So I'll take the first part. The training was in partnership with UNICEF, yes, but the middle managers were the key participants, and the directors of the 3 major departments supported and were present throughout. And because the shift will be a ministry-wide shift, we all need to be on the same page.
Yes.
And it's important as supervisors that sometimes we need to go back to basics. This training took them back to basics, the fundamentals, and reminded them of the key components of practice in all the different areas. There were 20 modules, but it was a training of trainers. So they had to learn the information, and then they made presentations in the afternoons.
Oh, that's nice.
And it evolved because one of the trainers had to leave, the facilitators had to leave. And so for this week, the participants ended up actually co-training with one of the facilitators. So they really embraced the training of trainers component.
Yeah.
And? You're a part. You did say
No, the training was very much holistic. It looked at all the areas as a social worker. In addition to what Ms. Starla said, it definitely looked at self-care because officers, supervisors would be listening and addressing a lot of personal issues and a lot of traumatic issues, traumatizing issues. And so one of the major things is to take care of your staff, to take care of yourself. Throughout the week, we heard a lot of my colleagues say you cannot pour from an empty cup. So it taught us how do we take care of ourselves and how do we take care of our supervisees in order for them to give back and working with the community. It also looked at, which was very, very important to us, in how do we work with clients from a strength-based approach, as opposed to us going in and kind of, lack of a better word, telling persons, well, I think you should do this, I think you should do this, coming from a perspective to have them, what do you want? How do you want? What direction do you want this to go? And have them participate a lot more so they own it. And they become self-sustainable at the end of it. And we can, like Ms. Starla rightfully said, withdraw eventually at some point.
No, because they're the ones that are out there. They're the ones, they're the frontliners. And which brings me to ask the question of that sociology part of things, because being out there as a social worker, we could hear the stories, we see the stories in the news, and you guys have to be there in the forefront, which could be traumatic, empathetic. You need to be empathetic, compassionate, and all of these things. What part of the training actually focused there? Because how do we go out there having to see or not knowing what you're going to meet? You meet this and then what? How do you do that?
The self-care component, really, I mean, we delved into that all day yesterday, well, majority of the day yesterday, looking at emotional intelligence. How do we self-regulate? How do we check in with our colleagues in order to give that support? And social work is a process too. We have many phases. It's not like you do everything in one, but that support. I think that's the biggest thing, support from colleagues, support from supervisors. So changing the approach of supervision, like I mentioned, to a more supportive space and developmental space is so important. And that's why we were talking during the break about trainings being boring. This one was far from it. But one of the key things that we've added is a coaching component. So we end training of trainers today. Today we'll be looking at next steps and how we're going to implement all of these new tools and that we have at our disposal. But the next few months up to June, while the middle managers will train all the frontline staff, there will also be the implementation of the new supervision framework. And along with that comes coaching. There will be, all the middle managers will also be engaged in virtual coaching with some of the facilitators from this training to give them that support in terms of this new approach. And so moving forward, the idea is not to just train, but to create spaces like seminars for staff, practice spaces that you can process what you've seen, what you've gone through, to feel supported by your colleagues and things like that. That's the only way we can get through the work that we do.
Then let's talk, from the UNICEF standpoint. What are the next steps for UNICEF with respect to this project?
For UNICEF, as Starla said, we are going to be talking about next steps, but it is to support the ministry, to whatever the system strengthening actions that need to happen. UNICEF's role is to support and to advocate for these changes to continue. One of the key things that we really want to see happen is the sustainability of the process. So how do we support the middle managers to ensure that they can train their supervisees, as well as the rollout of the supervision framework. So we'll be keenly looking at those aspects to continue to provide whatever support is needed to the ministry.
And then finally for me, with respect to this entire training, were there any other department? We know when it comes to social work and social workers, there is a collaboration with the Belize Police Department, the courts, and all of these things. Are these people involved with this? And will this be trickled down to them so there is a smoother process with dealing with cases as such?
When we do the rollout is where we will broaden the participants, and there will be space to engage a few of our partner agencies. Yes, but the training of trainers itself was for the ministry, because the scope of work of the ministry is peculiar in many ways, and so we have to equip our middle managers with that ability to teach and coach.
Finally, for me, what are the other areas within the ministry that you are looking to strengthen apart from your social workers training?
We need a whole another show.
I just now see.
I mean, there's so many areas. We continue, and even looking at quality of service. The training is not the only thing that has to happen in order for us to improve quality of service, but looking at increasing the number of staff. With those heavy caseloads, we can't deliver the quality that we really would like to, or that families need. I know we're also advocating too for our social workers to be paid what they should be paid, because they're quite underpaid.
You tell them, girl.
Yes, it's a hard job.
Yes,
it's a hard job. So
having to move from different areas, having to, and the thing is the response time, it could be late night, early mornings, mid-morning. So it is a tough task.
It is a tough task.
It is one that you've got to have passion about.
That's what keeps them there. And I am so hopeful after having sat with the middle managers these entire 2 weeks. They know what they're doing. They are excellent social workers, and we are so blessed within this ministry to have them. And so I'm hopeful moving forward.
Ladies, that is a great way to tie
things off. So Melanie, we get it correct at the last part.
Melanie Barnes and Starla Bradley, Ganesha Smith. Ladies, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We are so grateful for your ministry and the work that you continue to do for the betterment of the community.
Thank you. Thank you.
We're going to take that break, and when we come back, we're going to be talking about one of the hottest fears around this time of the year. We're talking about Palote and their Valentine Fair. You gonna that, right? I think you're gonna that. You gonna that. But it's gonna be a great time. What can you find there, and when is that fair? We'll tell you
When we come back.
Stay with us.